The impulsive moment. Vivian Mercer smoothed down the midnight blue dress she'd borrowed from her friend Olivia, feeling like an imposter in the glittering ballroom of the Thornfield Hotel. Crystal chandeliers cast diamond-like reflections across the marble floors, while waiters in crisp uniforms balanced trays of champagne that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "Stop fidgeting," Olivia whispered, nudging her gently. "You look gorgeous, and nobody knows you don't belong here." "That's exactly the problem," Vivian replied, tugging at the dress's neckline. "I don't belong here. I should be at home with a book and my cat, not pretending to be interested in bidding on a weekend getaway to the Maldives." As the owner of a struggling independent bookstore, Vivian had only agreed to attend the prestigious Reed Foundation charity auction because Olivia had an extra ticket through her marketing job. Now, surrounded by Seattle's elite in their designer clothes and perfect smiles, she regretted the decision entirely. "You promised you'd try to have fun," Olivia reminded her, flicking her copper curls over one shoulder. Her eyes suddenly lit up with mischief. "I know what would make this interesting." Vivian recognized that look. "Whatever you're thinking, no. I dare you to kiss a complete stranger before midnight." "What? Are you 12? Vivian laughed, but Olivia's expression remained serious. "When's the last time you did something spontaneous? Something that wasn't planned, cataloged, and risk-assessed?" Olivia challenged. "Ever since Daniel left, you've buried yourself in that bookstore. It's been 2 years, Viv." The mention of her ex-fiancé stung, but Vivian knew there was truth in Olivia's words. She had retreated into her safe, predictable life, afraid to risk being hurt again. "Fine," she said suddenly, draining her champagne glass. "But if I get slapped or kicked out, you're paying my rent next month." As midnight approached, Vivian's courage wavered. She slipped out to the hotel's terrace garden, needing fresh air and a moment away from the crowd. The night was cool, fairy lights twinkling among manicured hedges. She spotted a man standing alone by a fountain, his back to her, as he gazed up at the stars. Something about his solitary figure resonated with her. Here was someone else seeking solitude amid the chaos. Without allowing herself to think too hard, Vivian walked toward him. "Excuse me," she said softly. When he turned, her breath caught. He was younger than she expected, perhaps in his mid-30s, with thoughtful hazel eyes and dark hair that curled slightly at his temples. He wore a perfectly tailored suit, yet something in his expression seemed uncomfortable, as though he too felt out of place. "I'm really sorry about this," Vivian said, heart hammering against her ribs. Before she could lose her nerve, she rose on her tiptoes, placed one hand lightly on his shoulder, and pressed her lips against his. The kiss lasted only seconds, soft and sweet and slightly off-center. When she pulled away, his eyes were wide with surprise. "I'm so sorry," she repeated, mortification washing over her. "It was a dare. I should go." She turned and fled back inside, not seeing the way he reached out as if to stop her or hearing him call, "Wait!" In her haste to escape, Vivian never noticed the respectful nods the man received from the staff or the curious glances from guests wondering why Julian Reed, the notoriously private billionaire whose foundation was hosting the event, was suddenly smiling for the first time that evening. Unexpected. Aftermath. 3 days after the charity auction, Vivian was shelving new arrivals at Footnotes and Fantasies, her small bookstore tucked between a cafe and a vintage clothing shop in Seattle's Fremont district. Rain pattered against the windows, creating the perfect ambiance for the handful of customers browsing the stacks. The bell above the door chimed, but Vivian remained focused on organizing the poetry section. "Excuse me," a deep voice said behind her. "I'm looking for a book about second chances." Something in the voice made Vivian freeze. Slowly, she turned around and found herself looking into the same hazel eyes she'd been unable to forget since Saturday night. "You?" she breathed, nearly dropping the copy of Mary Oliver poems in her hands. The man from the terrace stood before her in a simple gray sweater and jeans, looking remarkably different from his formal attire at the gala, but unmistakably the same person. A hesitant smile played at his lips. "I think we have some unfinished business," he said. "You disappeared before I could properly introduce myself. I'm Julian Reed." The name hit her like a bucket of cold water. "Reed? As in the Reed Foundation? As in—" Her voice trailed off as realization dawned. "Oh my God, you're the host. I kissed the host of the entire event." Julian's smile widened. "Technically, you kissed the founder of the foundation, but yes." Vivian's face burned with embarrassment. "I am so sorry. My friend dared me, which is a terrible excuse, I know. I promise I'm not some kind of ruthless social climber," he suggested, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Considering you ran away and didn't try to slip me your business card, I'd ruled that out." Vivian couldn't help but laugh despite her mortification. "How did you find me?" "Your friend, the redhead. I asked around, and someone knew she worked for Horizon Marketing. I may have implied I wanted to hire her company." He shrugged, looking slightly embarrassed himself. "I just wanted to know who you were." "Why?" Vivian asked, genuinely puzzled. Julian glanced around the bookstore, taking in the mismatched chairs, the handwritten recommendation cards, and the elderly cat sleeping in the window display. "Because you're the first person in years who didn't know who I was before we met. Do you have any idea how rare that is in my life?" He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking vulnerable. "You have no idea who I am, do you?" Vivian shook her head slowly. "Should I?" "Julian Reed? Reed Technologies? The privacy browser system?" When she still looked blank, he laughed. "This is refreshing. I'm apparently what business magazines call a tech visionary, which mostly means I created some software that made a lot of money and now I can't go anywhere without people wanting something from me." "Well, I want you to buy a book," Vivian said with newfound confidence. "That's my only agenda." A customer approached the counter and Vivian excused herself to ring up their purchase. When she returned, Julian was examining her staff recommendations. "Shelf, you suggested all of these?" he asked, gesturing to the eclectic mix of titles. "Most of them. My assistant manager Eleanor handles the romance and mystery sections. I'm more into literary fiction and obscure poetry that nobody buys." "I'd like this one," Julian said, picking up her recommendation of The Night Circus. As she rang him up, Vivian found herself studying his face. Without the dim lighting of the terrace and the haze of champagne, she could see the intelligence in his eyes, the slight furrow between his brows that suggested he thought deeply about things. "Would you have dinner with me tonight?" he asked suddenly. "Nothing fancy, just conversation." Vivian hesitated. "Why me? I'm sure you know plenty of interesting people." "I know plenty of people who find me interesting," he corrected. "That's different. You kissed a stranger on a terrace, not a billionaire. I'd like to know that person." Against her better judgment, Vivian found herself nodding. "There's a good Thai place around the corner. They don't take reservations, and the owner definitely won't care who you are." Julian's genuine smile lit up his entire face. "That sounds perfect." Worlds apart. The following weeks brought an unexpected rhythm to Vivian's life. Julian would appear at her bookstore with takeout coffee or text to see if she wanted to try a new restaurant. Their Thai dinner had stretched into 3 hours of conversation that felt both effortless and electric. Despite her initial reservations, Vivian found herself looking forward to their time together, even as she tried to keep her expectations grounded. Tonight, Julian had invited her to a small dinner at his home, the first time she'd see where he lived. As her rideshare approached the address he'd given her in the Magnolia neighborhood, Vivian's stomach tightened. She'd expected something impressive, but the modern glass and timber structure perched on the hillside with panoramic views of Puget Sound exceeded anything she'd imagined. "This isn't a house," she murmured, as the driver pulled up to the security gate. "It's an architectural statement." A guard checked her ID before allowing the car through. Inside, Julian greeted her in the soaring entryway, looking pleased to see her but catching her wide-eyed expression. "Too much?" he asked quietly, taking her coat. "It's beautiful," Vivian said honestly. "Just different from my 600-square-foot apartment above the laundromat." He led her through the house to an intimate dining area with windows overlooking the water. The table was already set for two, with a chef working quietly in the adjacent kitchen. "I thought about cooking myself," Julian explained, "but I didn't want to poison you on our first dinner here." "Smart man," Vivian teased, relaxing slightly. "My culinary expertise extends to 3 pasta dishes and anything that can go in a toaster." Dinner was delicious, a seasonal menu featuring local ingredients, but Vivian found it hard to focus on the food with a staff member appearing periodically to refill their glasses or clear plates. When they finally moved to the living room with dessert, she exhaled in relief as the chef and server departed for the evening. "They're gone. Now I can put my elbows on the table and eat with my fingers," she joked, though part of her meant it. Julian studied her face. "You're uncomfortable here." It wasn't a question. Vivian considered deflecting but decided on honesty instead. "Not uncomfortable exactly. Just aware that this is your normal and it's very different from mine. I've never had dinner with someone who had staff before. I grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Tacoma with my mom working double shifts," Julian said softly. "This isn't my normal. It's just my current reality. Sometimes I still feel like I'm playing a part." The vulnerability in his admission touched her. "How did you get from there to here?" Julian told her about teaching himself to code as a teenager, about the privacy browser he developed in college that unexpectedly took off, about the years of working 18-hour days before his company exploded in value. "The money changed everything around me," he said. "But not necessarily me. That's why I've become somewhat reclusive. It's exhausting trying to figure out who sees you and who sees your bank account." Vivian understood that sentiment more than he knew. After her broken engagement, she'd struggled with similar questions about her own worth and what people wanted from her. Their conversation shifted to lighter topics, and they ended up sitting side by side on his balcony, sharing a blanket against the evening chill as they talked about favorite books and childhood memories. It was nearly midnight when Vivian's phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Emergency at the store. Pipe burst in the wall. Eleanor handling plumber but need you tomorrow a.m." "Everything okay?" Julian asked, noticing her expression. "Water pipe burst at my bookstore," Vivian sighed, the real world crashing back. "I need to go." "I'll drive you," Julian offered immediately. "It's fine. I can get a... Please let me help." The next morning found them both at Footnotes and Fantasies at 6 a.m., Julian in yesterday's clothes with coffee and pastries, helping Vivian move shelves away from the affected wall. By 9, when the repair crew arrived, his designer sweater was dusty and his hair disheveled. Eleanor, Vivian's assistant manager, arrived shortly after, stopping short at the sight of Julian Reed on his knees, helping to salvage water-damaged books. "Oh my God," she whispered to Vivian while Julian chatted with the plumber. "That's Julian Reed, the Julian Reed, the guy who turned down a White House tech advisory position because he didn't want the publicity." "Is it?" Vivian replied innocently, but her heart sank a little. The bubble they'd been living in was beginning to thin. Their separate worlds were bound to collide eventually, and she wasn't sure what would remain when they did. "The breaking point, Ms. Mercer. Is it true you're dating Julian Reed?" "Vivian, over here. How did you meet? Are you the mystery woman from the charity auction?" The barrage of questions hit Vivian as she tried to unlock the bookstore's front door. 3 photographers and a woman with a recording device crowded the sidewalk, their sudden appearance shocking her so completely that she dropped her keys. "I have no comment," she managed, finally getting the door open and slipping inside. She locked it behind her, flipping the sign to closed, despite it being a Tuesday morning. Her hands shook as she pulled down the blinds. Her phone buzzed. It was Julian. Are you okay? I just saw the photos online. Vivian sank into the chair behind the counter. What photos? Someone at the restaurant last night. I'm so sorry, Viv. I should have been more careful. She pulled up a news site on her laptop and immediately found what he meant. There they were, sharing a quiet dinner at a small Italian place in Ballard. The headline read, Tech Billionaire, Julian Reed's Secret Romance with Local Bookseller. The article dissected everything from her dress, described as modest, to her background. They'd somehow found her college graduation announcement and her parents' names. They speculated about how long they'd been dating and whether she was the mystery woman spotted kissing him at his foundation's charity event. This is insane, she whispered into the phone. There are people outside my store. I'm sending someone over, Julian said immediately. Thomas can... No security. Guards. That will just make it worse. She took a deep breath. I need some time to process this, Julian. The silence on his end spoke volumes. I understand, he finally said. For what it's worth, I never wanted this for you. After they hung up, Vivian sat in her empty bookstore, remembering Julian's words. From their first real conversation, you have no idea how rare that is in my life. Now she understood completely what he'd meant. By afternoon, the photographers had left, but Vivian kept the store closed. She busied herself with inventory, trying not to check the steadily increasing online articles about her. Her phone buzzed, constantly with messages from friends who'd seen the news, including a particularly panicked one from her parents in Portland. Olivia arrived after work, using the back entrance. Holy shit, Viv! You're trending! Don't remind me, Vivian groaned. This is exactly why I shouldn't have gotten involved with someone like him. Someone successful and kind who clearly adores you? Olivia challenged, hands on her hips. Someone whose life comes with this! Vivian gestured wildly. Photographers and articles and speculation. I can't live like that. My customers won't want to shop here if they have to dodge paparazzi. So you're just giving up? After 6 weeks of being happier than I've seen you in years? Vivian avoided her friend's gaze. It was never going to work long-term anyway. We're from different worlds. That is such a cliché, Olivia scoffed. You're both book-loving introverts who geek out over indie films and have the same terrible sense of humor. The only difference is his checking account. But it wasn't just about money. It was about belonging, about feeling perpetually off balance in his world of casual luxury, about the scrutiny that came with his status and the way it now touched her life too. That evening, Vivian texted Julian. I think we need to take a step back. This attention is too much for me. His response came hours later. I respect your decision. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from this part of my life. For the next week, Vivian threw herself into work, reopening the store and pretending not to notice the occasional customer who came in just to stare at her. The photographers didn't return, but she felt exposed nevertheless, as if a protective layer had been stripped away. She missed Julian with an intensity that surprised her. She missed their conversations, his quiet laugh, the way he really listened when she spoke. But each time she considered calling him, she remembered the headlines and hesitated. Meanwhile, across the city, Julian sat in his home office, staring unseeing at his computer screen. His assistant, Thomas, entered with a concerned expression. Sir, the board is waiting for your decision on the privacy protocol update. Julian nodded absently. Tell them I'll have it by tomorrow. Thomas hesitated. If I may, sir, you haven't been yourself since the news stories about Ms. Mercer. That obvious, huh? Julian rubbed his face tiredly. Permission to speak freely? When Julian nodded, Thomas continued. I've worked for you for 7 years. In that time, I've Seen you walk away from difficult business deals without blinking. But this is the first time I've seen you walk away from something that actually matters to you." "She walked away," Julian corrected. "Did she? Or did she just need time?" Thomas placed a folder on the desk. "The media attention has died down. Perhaps it's time to show her that some things are worth the risk." After Thomas left, Julian opened his desk drawer and took out a small book of poetry, the one Vivian had recommended on their third meeting. Inside the cover, she'd written, "For those moments when you need to escape your own world and find another." He'd been doing that his entire adult life, escaping, retreating, protecting himself. But in doing so, he'd nearly missed finding the one person who saw past everything else to him. Julian picked up his phone and began to make calls. Choosing love. The sign on the door of Footnotes and Fantasies read, "Closed for private event," when Vivian arrived on Wednesday morning. Confused, she checked her calendar. There was nothing scheduled. Using her key, she pushed open the door and stopped in her tracks. The bookstore had been transformed. Tiny fairy lights twinkled from the ceiling, reminiscent of the garden terrace where they'd first met. Each bookshelf featured small vases of wildflowers nestled between the volumes. In the center of the store, where the reading circle usually stood, was a single table with 2 chairs. "What on earth?" she whispered. "I thought we might need neutral territory." Julian's voice came from behind the poetry section. He stepped forward, looking both nervous and determined, dressed simply in jeans and a blue button-down shirt. "How did you get in here?" Vivian asked, still processing the scene before her. "Eleanor helped." "Don't be mad at her. I was very persuasive." Vivian sat down her bag, trying to maintain her composure despite the way her heart leapt at seeing him. "Julian, I told you I needed space." "I know, and I've respected that for 10 days, he said, staying where he was. "But before you make a final decision about us, I wanted a chance to say something." When she didn't object, he continued, "I've spent most of my adult life hiding, building walls and security systems, both literal and metaphorical. It seemed easier than letting people close enough to disappoint me." He took a step forward. "Then you kissed me on that terrace, and for a moment, I was just a man being kissed by a beautiful woman under the stars." Despite herself, Vivian felt a smile tugging at her lips. "It was pretty impulsive." "It was perfect," he corrected. "And everything since then has shown me what I've been missing by keeping the world at arm's length." "But that's exactly the problem," Vivian said finally, voicing what had been troubling her. "I disrupted your carefully constructed life. I brought unwanted attention, exactly what you've been avoiding." Julian shook his head. "That's what I realized this week. I've been hiding from the wrong things. Yes, I value my privacy, but I've used it as an excuse to avoid real connection." He ran a hand through his hair in that now familiar gesture. "The truth is, I'd face 100 photographers if it meant keeping you in my life." He gestured to the chair. "Have breakfast with me, please?" Vivian hesitated, then nodded, moving to sit at the table. Julian revealed a basket containing her favorite pastries from the cafe next door and poured coffee from a thermos. "I've been thinking about solutions," he said as they ate. "Ways we could make this work without sacrificing what matters to each of us." "Such as?" she asked, curiosity winning over caution. "I could step back from public appearances, let someone else be the face of the foundation. Or we could date more openly, but on our terms, controlled press access that might actually reduce the intrusive attention." His thoughtfulness touched her, but Vivian shook her head slowly. "Those are external fixes. My hesitation isn't just about the photographers, Julian." "Then what is it about?" She looked down at her coffee, gathering courage. "I'm afraid of losing myself in your world, of becoming Julian Reed's girlfriend instead of Vivian Mercer, bookstore owner, of never quite belonging, but no longer fitting in my old life either." Understanding dawned in his eyes. I never wanted to change your life. I fell for you precisely because you have your own world, your own passions. I know, she said softly. And I fell for you because behind all the success and wealth, you're still the man who helps move bookshelves at 6 a.m. and gets excited about finding rare editions of poetry. Julian reached across the table, not quite touching her hand. What, if we built something new together? Not my world or your world, but our world. One where sometimes we have dinner with my investors and sometimes we eat ramen on your couch. Where your bookstore remains exactly as it is, the heart of who you are, but maybe with better plumbing. That made her laugh, breaking the tension. I do need better plumbing, and I need you, he said simply. The real question is, do you still want this? Us? Even with the complications? Vivian finally allowed herself to look directly into his eyes, those hazel eyes that had drawn her in from the first moment. She saw the vulnerability there, the hope, and realized he was as scared as she was. For all his wealth and power, Julian, Reed was just a man asking a woman to take a chance on him. I missed you, she admitted. More than I expected to. I missed you too. Even Tomas noticed I was miserable. She smiled, then grew serious. If we do this, we need to promise each other something. You can't hide behind your walls, and I can't run away when things get complicated. We both have to stay and figure it out together. Julian's face lit up with hope. I promise if you do. Vivian reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. Then yes, I want to build our world together. He leaned forward and she met him halfway for a kiss that felt like coming home. When they parted, she laughed softly. What? He asked. I was just thinking. I'm glad Olivia dared me to kiss a stranger that night. Julian smiled, tracing her cheekbone with his thumb. And I'm glad I decided to get some air on that terrace. Some might call it fate. I call it the best impulsive decision I ever made, Vivian replied, pulling him in for another kiss as morning sunlight filtered through the bookstore windows, illuminating the beginning of their shared story. Eleanor found them an hour later, still talking at the little table among the books, making plans for a future neither had imagined before an impulsive kiss changed everything. Should I open the store? She asked, trying to hide her smile. Vivian looked at Julian, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, Vivian decided. It's time to open up and let the world in.